Hello, my name is James Seese, and I'm a senior mechanical engineering student here at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. This past summer, I had the honor of working with Professor Abdullahi Salman on a research project concerning hurricanes, specifically hurricanes that have affected the area of Mobile Bay, Alabama. You can probably guess a couple reasons why we focused on that area, but I'm here to tell you a whole lot of information about what went down, what we discovered, and what you can take away from this. Now, the research project I worked with was called Simulating a Storm Surge from a Category 5 Hurricane Making Landfall in Mobile Bay. Now, that's a fair mouthful, so I'll boil it down for you. I messed around with hurricanes all summer, and I was trying to predict the storm surge of them, which I'll get into what that is in just a second. Now, the best place to start off in describing both my project and hurricanes is by talking about what a hurricane really is. So, a hurricane at its heart is a storm. Winds, rain, you've probably experienced a storm before in your life. What a hurricane adds to it is not only ramping up the winds and the rain to an incredible level, it also adds what's called a storm surge to it, which is an incredible wall of water that accompanies a hurricane when it first makes landfall. Just to give you an idea of this, Hurricane Katrina's storm surge was in excess of 12 feet. 12 feet of water hurtling directly at you is going to ruin your day, no matter what you use against it. Now, as for why this project focused on the area of Mobile Bay as compared to the rest of the coastline, is Mobile Bay forms an economic heartline for Alabama, as well as having major historical and cultural impact on the state as well. Not only that, Mobile being a major city with a population of 200,000 just related to the city proper, means any not only rescue efforts, but also efforts to evacuate the area need to be properly planned out ahead of time. So, what our project aimed to do was to predict this dangerous storm surge that can accompany the most terrible of hurricanes, Category 5. Now, as I already mentioned, the study focused on Mobile Bay, Alabama for the aforementioned reasons. But Mobile Bay actually hasn't been hit by a Category 5 since Hurricane Camille back in 1969. Now, that's a long time, in excess of 50 years, so predicting the results of a Category 5 are a little bit hard to do with just that data. So, our project focused on taking Category 3 hurricanes, of which there have been several in recent years, and upgrade them into fake Category 5 hurricanes. By using this method, we could do at least some minor prediction to see what would the storm surge and ultimately what the elevation of the water after the surge retreated would be. This can allow some disaster prediction as well as several other aspects of prediction. Now, not only were we focused on the storm surge, however, when running these simulations, we also took the hurricane's wind pressure, minimum pressure was the main focus, and velocity across its path, specifically focused on the Gulf as it approached Alabama, but the storm's path also was a matter of doing this. This information was all taken using a program and a subprogram therein called SMS, or the Surface Water Modeling System, which with the subprogram being called ADCIRC, Advanced Circulation Model. So, to expound upon these 2 points, or just tell you a bit more about them, SMS is a very focused storm prediction model. It helps to model not only just the water that's implied by its name, but also it can track the winds, pressure, and a lot of other data about different types of storms. In fact, using data from NOAA, specifically their HERDAT-2 database, I was able to input data from multiple hurricanes into it. In fact, almost everything except the RMW value, which I'll get into in a little bit, was directly calculated for scientists and other interested parties right there in the document, which is incredibly helpful for not only me, but for anybody who's trying to do a storm prediction algorithm. Now, As I mentioned, the RMW value, or the radius of mean winds, was the only value not calculated out in this database. So to do that, I actually referenced a paper by Peter J. Vickery and, bless his heart for how I'm going to pronounce his name, Wadera? Sorry. And it was an incredibly informative paper that pulled actually from even several other papers therein to give the resulting equation that you see on the screen in front of you. Now, there's a lot more that you can go in that paper, and if you're interested in a lot of the storm science about hurricanes, I highly suggest reading it. The link is actually at the end of my presentation, which I'll hover for at least a couple seconds, and quite possibly in the description below if I can hopefully get that done. Even then, between these two sources, between the HERDAT2 database and the paper there and my own hand calculations, I was able to get the data to run storms. Now, I mentioned before that the storms had to be made into Category 5s. Now, to make a storm a Category 5, there are a couple different methods. The usual method is actually to completely create a fake hurricane. Basically, from start to finish, you create what's called a synthetic hurricane with all of your own data, including tidal databases, wind and pressure databases, and basically create an entire fake atmospheric system. This is a little bit above what I was able to achieve in 10 weeks. So what I decided to do was, since I had the HERDAT2 database and storm data from about the late 1800s all the way to about 2018, was to take data from Hurricane Michael, which was a Category 5, and input its landfall data into the Category 3 hurricanes. Using this, while it's tentative at best, gave us at least a short look into what these hurricanes would have been like had they upgraded to a Category 5 hurricane right before and then made landfall as a Category 5. And if you put a couple numbers together, landfall is the most dangerous part of the hurricane for people, because that is when you will find the largest wall of water, the most direct winds, and heavy rains all hitting you at once. Now, 8 data points were then chosen from when it made landfall. These hurricanes made landfall and then compared. Now, I'll do a short little description on the hurricanes used. I highly recommend, if you really want to know more though, that you do a quick Google search on them. In fact, weather.gov typed into a Google search bar with the hurricane's name will give you the exact data from which I pulled virtually all the things you're about to see on screen. So the first 2 hurricanes that I used, since I did them by year, were Hurricane Frederick and Alina. Frederick hit in 1979 and Alina hit in 1985. And as you can see from the background pictures, the data on them was a little bit tentative at best. Even so, they were both Category 3s and they both caused a fair amount of damage and both hit within the relevant range to Mobile Bay. The next 2 hurricanes I used were Hurricanes Opal and Ivan. Opal hit in 1995, while Ivan hit in the year 2004. Now, the specific thing that I want to make a note here is that Ivan landed almost directly on top of Mobile Bay. So just not even just for data points that I calculated, but for any overall results, the damage is a lot more focused on the Mobile Bay area itself. In fact, if the people are still living there, a number of residents might even be able to tell you specifically what damage was done when this hurricane made landfall. The next 2 hurricanes I used were Hurricanes Dennis and Katrina. Now, Dennis hit in the year 2005 and Katrina also hit in the year 2005, which was a very unfortunate year for the Gulf Coast, is shown by that. Katrina specifically is known, I would almost want to say worldwide, but most definitely coastwide along the Gulf Coast for the sheer amount of damage it did, since due to a number of different factors, it managed to basically destroy the entire city of New Orleans. This is why, actually, if you compare any of the data that's shown on screen, Katrina is far and above one of the most deadly hurricanes that's on here. Now, as I mentioned, landfall is the most destructive time period for the hurricane to us. actually did with the hurricane simulations that I ran was we were able to show the elevation levels of the water at the moment of landfall and even then beyond it. And we were able to take the maximum and minimum values for this elevation and display those. Specifically, what we're interested in would probably be the maximum values, but if you take a quick look at the picture behind you, a hurricane doesn't only push water, it has to take that water from somewhere. Hence why what you're looking at is the USS Alabama, the mighty battleship, and an almost drained Mobile Bay, because hurricanes can actually move water from one place to another with somewhat interesting and slightly disastrous results by doing this. On screen is a specific example of what we managed to pull and produce from this. This specific chart is also in reference on the poster that is posted in my university, and on the right, you'll see two images taken from SMS of specifically some of the work that was done. On the right, again, picture from SMS of it, and on the left actually is Hurricane Katrina. So both these pictures actually demonstrate Hurricane Katrina, with the right being the path and the maximum water elevation points when it made landfall. I tell you the numbers, but what I can tell you is when you see those red zones, those are in excess of 12 feet. Now, the biggest takeaways that I managed to produce from my research project was that hurricanes to the west, or for a couple obvious reasons, directly on Mobile Bay caused the largest elevations. Now, I have a couple of theories that I really wish I would be able to back up, but 10 weeks is a limited time period to be able to produce all of this data. But the biggest factor I can contribute to this is that if you take a look at the topography of Mobile Bay, on the eastern part of the bay is actually an archipelago with fair elevation that completely juts out from the major landform. However, on the western edge of Mobile Bay is actually an opening with just several islands protecting it. This would mean that if a hurricane were to manage to push water into the bay, not only could it enter from the direct bay, but it also would be able to enter from the west or stage left of the bay. There are a couple other factors that could cause this, but this is what I would be willing to go on record stating is the most probable cause for some of these. Now, I would like to mention that there are a couple improvements that could be done to it. I've put them a couple on screen, but the biggest one I have to state is that coronavirus was actually ongoing throughout the project. So I didn't actually manage to meet in person as much as I would have wanted to, and seeing that I come from mechanical engineering, I managed to pick things up pretty quickly, but if I really wish I would have been able to have more in-person time with my professor. But even then, I really have to throw some acknowledgements out to Professor Salman and one of his PhD students, Babak Salarieh. They were not only amazing for accepting me and choosing me to be able to do this project, but they were also amazing for their help throughout not only the coronavirus that was affecting through this, but also for being incredibly helpful to me throughout all of this. I also would be remiss if I didn't thank my school and many of the different divisions therein. You can see their specific names in there, but to everyone who helped make this research project an actuality, my ever-going thanks out to you, because not only was I able to take away from this, but the people of Alabama will be able to take away from this. It's a good proof of concept for anybody who's really looking to do something like this out there. And it also provides a really good opportunity to see the basic raw data of what happens if a Category 5 hits Mobile Bay. If I can save as so much as one person's life just from putting out what I have, then my job is complete. So my thanks to them. And this is your promised bibliography with Peter J. Vickery and Mr. Durs Wadera, who were of great help with their paper. Thank you, and I hope you have a very storm-free future.